Jonathan Graham was the kind of man people admired. In his quiet, small-town neighborhood, he was known for his kindness, integrity, and unwavering devotion to his wife, Emily. Their marriage, spanning 2 decades, was often considered an example of what true partnership looked like. To everyone around them, Jonathan and Emily were the ideal couple. Solid, loving, and supportive. Emily, a lively and creative woman, had always been the light of Jonathan's life. In their early years, she was his biggest cheerleader as he built a career as a schoolteacher. She had a way of making even the most ordinary days extraordinary with her infectious energy and warmth. Over the years, her focus shifted toward her own interests, and recently, she had started an online channel where she shared crafting tutorials. Jonathan was proud of her newfound passion, and often told his friends about how Emily was building something of her own. But lately, something felt different. Emily had become unusually busy, spending hours in her craft room with the door shut. Her phone, once left on the kitchen counter without a second thought, was now always with her. Jonathan noticed she would smile at her screen during dinner or excuse herself to take calls in the other room. At first, he didn't think much of it. Emily had always been social, and her online community was growing rapidly. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Emily's phone buzzed with a new message. She chuckled quietly, her eyes glued to the screen. "What's so funny?" Jonathan asked casually, reaching for the salad bowl. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a joke from one of the girls in my crafting group," she replied, quickly locking her phone and placing it face down on the table. Jonathan smiled, but her evasiveness didn't escape him. Emily had never been secretive before. Was he imagining things? Was he being paranoid? He told himself not to overthink it. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between them grew. Emily seemed more preoccupied than ever. She started going out more often, claiming she needed new supplies for her crafting projects. Jonathan offered to join her, but she always found a reason to go alone. One Saturday morning, as Jonathan worked in the garden, he noticed Emily leaving the house in a hurry. She didn't even mention where she was going. A few hours later, she returned with no shopping bags in hand. "How was the store?" Jonathan asked, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Crowded," she replied with a forced smile. "I'll go back tomorrow when it's quieter." Jonathan nodded, but his gut told him something wasn't right. Emily loved shopping for her crafts. She would often come home excited, eager to show him her latest finds. Now she seemed detached, almost as if the errands were an afterthought. That night, as Emily fell asleep, Jonathan sat in his study, replaying the past few weeks in his mind. He wanted to believe that there was a simple explanation for her behavior. But the lingering doubt gnawed at him. Was Emily hiding something? A shocking discovery. The turning point came on a Sunday afternoon. Emily had gone out for what she claimed was a crafting workshop. Jonathan, feeling restless, decided to organize the garage. As he moved boxes and sorted through old tools, he came across Emily's old laptop. It hadn't been used in years, ever since she upgraded to a newer model. On a whim, he decided to turn it on. As the laptop powered up, Jonathan noticed the desktop was cluttered with old files and photos. He smiled nostalgically as he clicked through pictures of family vacations and birthdays. But as he continued exploring, he stumbled upon a folder named Private. Jonathan hesitated. He knew invading Emily's privacy wasn't right, but curiosity got the better of him. When he opened the folder, his heart sank. Inside were dozens of screenshots of chat messages. The conversations were with someone named Chris. The messages weren't overtly inappropriate, but they were deeply personal. Emily confided in Chris about things she never mentioned to Jonathan. Her frustrations, her dreams, and her feelings of being unappreciated. "I feel like Jonathan doesn't understand me anymore," one message read. "Chris, you're the only one who truly listens." Jonathan's hands trembled as he scrolled through the messages. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that Emily had been confiding in another man or the realization that she felt this way about their marriage. Confrontation deferred. That evening, Jonathan couldn't bring himself to confront Emily. Instead, he tried to act normal, observing her every move. Emily, oblivious to his discovery, went about her evening routine as if nothing had changed. Jonathan lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with questions. Who was Chris? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, why hadn't Emily talked to him about how she was feeling? As the sun rose the next morning, Jonathan made a decision. He wouldn't jump to conclusions. He needed more information before confronting Emily. The following week, Jonathan's suspicion turned into quiet resolve. He wasn't one to act impulsively, but the ache in his heart demanded answers. His mind kept replaying the messages he had read on Emily's old laptop. Could this really be happening? Was his wife, his Emily, seeking solace in someone else's words? Jonathan decided to observe instead of accuse. If there was one thing he had learned from years of teaching unruly students, it was that rushing to judgment often led to chaos. He needed clarity, and he intended to find it without compromising his integrity, or Emily's. A slip of the tongue. It was a quiet Wednesday evening when Jonathan noticed an opportunity to dig deeper. Emily was cooking dinner while Jonathan casually sat at the dining table, pretending to read a magazine. Her phone, which was usually glued to her side, buzzed on the kitchen counter. Emily glanced at the screen and froze for a split second. It was subtle, but Jonathan caught it. She picked up the phone and swiped quickly, the glow of the screen reflecting in her uneasy expression. "Everything okay?" Jonathan asked, his tone as neutral as possible. "Oh yes, just a reminder about a craft fair this weekend," Emily replied, not meeting his eyes. Jonathan nodded, filing away the information. That night, as Emily went to bed early, Jonathan sat on the couch, staring at his hands. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. The next morning, Jonathan decided to check the craft fair website. It was real enough, but something didn't sit right with him. Emily had been attending so many workshops and fairs lately, yet she rarely brought home any new projects or supplies. Gathering clues. Jonathan's chance came a few days later when Emily mentioned she'd be gone for the better part of Saturday to attend a private crafting retreat, an hour out of town. As she packed her bag that morning, Jonathan offered a warm smile. "Have a great time, honey. You deserve it," he said, kissing her on the forehead. "Thanks, John," Emily replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Once Emily drove off, Jonathan took action. He called a trusted friend, Paul, who had once worked in law enforcement. Without revealing too much, Jonathan asked for advice on how to track someone discreetly. Paul hesitated but eventually agreed to lend him a GPS tracker that could be discreetly placed in a car. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt as he affixed the device to Emily's car earlier that week, but his need for answers outweighed his reservations. That Saturday, with Emily gone, Jonathan opened the tracking app. To his surprise, her car didn't head toward the location she had mentioned. Instead, it stopped at a quaint coffee shop in the next town over. Jonathan felt his heart tighten. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to see for himself. Grabbing his coat, he drove to the location, parking a safe distance away. From the coffee shop window, he spotted Emily seated across from a man. They were laughing, leaning slightly toward each other, their conversation animated. Jonathan's stomach churned, but he forced himself to stay calm. Who was this man? Was it Chris? The confrontation begins. Jonathan stayed in his car, battling his emotions. He couldn't barge in, not without knowing the full story. Instead, he decided to observe and gather more information. After about an hour, Emily and the man exited the coffee shop. Jonathan snapped a few discreet photos. He recognized the man now. It was Chris Harper, a local artist who had once collaborated with Emily on her online channel. Jonathan had always thought of Chris as charming but harmless. Now he wasn't so sure. When Emily returned home that evening, Jonathan played it cool. He asked about her retreat, and Emily launched into an elaborate explanation about learning new crafting techniques. Jonathan nodded, pretending to listen, all the while feeling the weight of her deception. That night, as Emily slept soundly beside him, Jonathan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The evidence was piling up, but he still didn't have the answers he needed. Was this an emotional affair? A professional partnership that had grown too close? Or something else entirely? A revelation? Determined to find out, Jonathan decided to confront Chris directly. He reached out under the guise of wanting to discuss a potential collaboration. Chris agreed to meet at a local diner the following day. When they met, Jonathan wasted no time. "Chris, I appreciate you meeting me," Jonathan began, his tone calm but firm. "I have some questions about your relationship with my wife, Emily." Chris looked surprised but didn't deny knowing her. "Of course I know Emily. We've worked together on a few projects. She's very talented." Jonathan studied his face carefully. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time together lately. I just want to know if there's something I should be worried about." Chris hesitated, then sighed. "Jonathan, I think you might be misunderstanding something. Emily's been going through a tough time lately. She's been talking to me about feeling lost. But it's not what you think. She respects you deeply." Jonathan frowned. "If that's true, then why hasn't she come to me about it?" Chris shook his head. "I can't answer that for her, but I promise you, there's nothing inappropriate going on between us. She just needed someone to talk to." Jonathan left the diner with a heavy heart. Chris had been calm and sincere during their conversation, but something about his words left Jonathan uneasy. If Emily had been feeling lost, why hadn't she shared those feelings with him? He replayed the moments in their marriage where they might have drifted apart, but nothing stood out. For days, Jonathan tried to confront Emily indirectly, asking her how she was feeling or if something was bothering her. Emily always responded with the same cheery smile, insisting everything was fine. But Jonathan could see through her facade. The distance between them was growing, and Jonathan knew it was time to address the issue head-on. The confrontation. One quiet evening after dinner, Jonathan set his glass of water down and looked Emily in the eye. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but firm, "I need to talk to you about something." Emily glanced up from her phone, startled by his serious tone. "What is it, John?" "I know you've been meeting with Chris," he said plainly. Emily's face froze. Her hand gripped the edge of the table as if bracing herself. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I saw you," Jonathan said, his voice softer now. "At the coffee shop. I know about the messages, too. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I need to understand what's going on." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, Jonathan thought she might deny everything. But instead she sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping as though a weight had been lifted. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't mean for what to happen?" Jonathan asked, leaning forward. "I've been feeling disconnected, John," Emily admitted. "Not from you but from myself. For months now I've been questioning everything. My purpose, my identity, even my passion for crafting. Chris. He just happened to be there when I needed someone to talk to." Jonathan frowned. "Why didn't you come to me? I've always been here for you." "I didn't want to burden you," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "You've always been so strong, so steady. I didn't think you'd understand." Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. Had he unintentionally made her feel like she couldn't confide in him? Rebuilding trust. The days that followed were some of the hardest in their marriage. Emily assured Jonathan that her relationship with Chris had been purely emotional, a friendship that had become too intimate. There was no physical infidelity, but the betrayal of trust was still profound. Jonathan struggled to reconcile his feelings. On one hand, he was relieved that there had been no physical affair. On the other, he felt hurt that Emily had turned to someone else during her time of need. They decided to seek help together. A counselor guided them through their feelings, helping them identify the cracks in their relationship. Through these sessions, Jonathan learned that Emily had been battling feelings of inadequacy, particularly as she compared her crafting channel to others. Meanwhile, Emily realized that Jonathan's calm and composed demeanor sometimes made her feel like her emotions weren't valid. Step forward. One evening, as they sat in the garden together, Jonathan turned to Emily and said, "I don't want us to go through this again. If something's bothering you, promise me you'll talk to me about it. Even if it's hard." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Promise, John. And I'm sorry for not being honest with you sooner. I'll never make that mistake again." For the first time in months, Jonathan felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they were taking steps in the right direction. After the confrontation and counseling sessions, Jonathan and Emily's home took on an unfamiliar quietness. The air between them was no longer filled with the usual warmth and laughter. It wasn't hostile, but it was heavy with the weight of their unspoken emotions. Though they were trying, trust, once fractured, proved hard to mend. Unspoken efforts. Jonathan spent more time in the garden, tending to the plants he loved. The rows of blooming flowers and neatly trimmed bushes gave him a sense of control amidst the turmoil. Every evening, he would return to the house, hoping to feel the connection they once had, but Emily often seemed lost in her thoughts. On one such evening, as Jonathan trimmed the roses, Emily appeared at the garden gate. She was holding a tray with 2 cups of tea, something she hadn't done in months. "I thought you might want a break," she said softly, setting the tray on the small garden table. Jonathan looked up, surprised by her gesture. "Thank you," he said, his voice tinged with hesitation. Emily sat down across from him, wrapping her hands around her cup. "I know things aren't the same," she began, "but I want to try, John. I really do." Jonathan met her gaze. "So do I, Emily. But it's going to take time. Trust doesn't just come back overnight." "I know," Emily replied, her voice trembling. "And I'm willing to work for it. A joint effort." The next day, Emily suggested something that surprised Jonathan. "What if we started working on a project together?" she asked during breakfast. "A project?" Jonathan repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, something we can build together. It doesn't have to be anything big, just something that helps us reconnect," Emily explained, her eyes pleading. Jonathan hesitated but eventually nodded. "'Kay. Let's give it a shot." They decided to create a small crafting corner in their home. Emily would teach Jonathan basic crafting skills, and Jonathan would help with the structural setup: shelves, storage units, and lighting. It wasn't about the project itself. It was about spending time together and rebuilding what they had lost. At first, their interactions were awkward. Jonathan struggled to follow Emily's crafting instructions, and Emily often laughed at his clumsy attempts to glue things together. But as the days turned into weeks, the project became a source of joy. The role of small gestures. One evening, as Jonathan worked on assembling a shelf, Emily brought him a glass of lemonade. "Here," she said, handing it to him with a smile. "You've been at it for hours." Jonathan took the glass and smiled back. "Thanks. I could use the break." As they sat together, Emily reached out and placed her hand on his. It was the first time in weeks that she had initiated physical contact. "I miss this," she said quietly. Jonathan squeezed her hand. "I do too." Facing Chris again. While Jonathan and Emily were making progress, there was still one lingering issue: Chris. Although Emily assured Jonathan that their interactions had ceased, Jonathan couldn't ignore the nagging thought that Chris might still be in the background. One afternoon, while Emily was out running errands, Jonathan received an unexpected call. "Jonathan, it's Chris," the voice on the other end said. Jonathan's grip on the phone tightened. "Chris, why are you calling me?" "I wanted to apologize," Chris said sincerely. "I never meant to come between you and Emily. She's a wonderful person, and I respect your marriage. I hope you both can work things out." Jonathan was taken aback. Chris's tone was genuine, but it didn't erase the hurt he felt. "I appreciate the apology," Jonathan said curtly, "but I'd prefer it if you stayed away from Emily from now on. You have my word, Chris replied before hanging up. Jonathan felt a strange sense of closure. While Chris's role in their troubles couldn't be undone, at least now there was clarity and distance. A letter of reassurance. That evening, Emily handed Jonathan an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, puzzled. "Just something I've been meaning to give you," she said, her voice soft. Jonathan opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter. "Dear John, I don't know where to begin, but I need you to know how deeply sorry I am for the pain I've caused you. These past few months, I've realized just how much I've taken our marriage for granted. You've always been my rock, and I let my own insecurities and doubts cloud my judgment. Chris was never meant to be a substitute for you, and I know how much it hurt you that I turned to someone else. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to our marriage. You've always been patient, kind, and understanding, even when I didn't deserve it. I want to be worthy of that love again. I want us to find our way back to each other, not just as husband and wife, but as best friends. Please know that I'm committed to us, John. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you. With all my heart, Emily." Jonathan folded the letter and looked at Emily, who stood anxiously waiting for his reaction. "I believe you," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm willing to move forward with you." Emily's face lit up with relief, and for the first time in a long time, Jonathan felt the beginnings of peace. Jonathan's decision to move forward brought a sense of cautious optimism to their lives. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it no longer consumed their every moment. Their small crafting corner stood as a testament to their commitment to rebuild, piece by piece, what had once been fractured. Though they had taken the first steps, the journey ahead was far from easy. Trust, once broken, demands patience and effort to repair. For Jonathan and Emily, it would take not just time but also shared experiences to bridge the gap between them. Healing through routine. The following weeks saw Jonathan and Emily falling into a new routine. Every Saturday they dedicated the day to working on their crafting space. Emily taught Jonathan how to paint intricate designs, while Jonathan built sturdy wooden frames for her projects. Their teamwork, though not flawless, brought them closer. One afternoon, as they worked on repainting an old shelf, Emily glanced at Jonathan and said, "You know, you're not bad at this." Jonathan chuckled, wiping a streak of paint from his cheek. "Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment." For a brief moment, they shared a laugh. An easy, natural connection that felt like a glimpse of their old selves. The test of patience. Despite their progress, there were still moments when the past resurfaced. One evening, while sorting through Emily's crafting supplies, Jonathan stumbled upon a sketchbook with Chris's name scribbled on the first page. His heart sank. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the sketchbook. Emily turned pale. "Oh, I forgot that was in there," she stammered. Jonathan's expression hardened. "You said you cut ties with him." "I did, John," Emily said quickly. "This was from months ago before everything happened. I didn't think to get rid of it." Jonathan stared at her, his mind racing. But then he took a deep breath. "Okay," he said finally, handing her the book. "Let's just make sure we're not holding on to things that don't belong in our lives anymore." Emily nodded, her voice steady. "You're right. I'll get rid of it." The moment was tense, but it marked a turning point. Both Jonathan and Emily realized that rebuilding trust meant being completely honest, even when it was uncomfortable. A surprise gesture. Determined to show Emily that he was still committed to their relationship, Jonathan planned a surprise for her. One Friday evening, he cleared the dining room table and set it with candles, her favorite dishes, and a small bouquet of fresh flowers from their garden. When Emily walked in, she gasped. "John, what's all this?" "I thought we could have a special dinner," he said, pulling out a chair for her. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she sat down. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," Jonathan replied, sitting across from her. "I know things haven't been easy, but I wanted to remind you that I'm still here. I'm still us." As they ate, Emily reached for his hand. "Thank you, John. For everything. I don't deserve you." Jonathan smiled softly. We're a team, Emily. We'll get through this together. Unexpected encouragement. While Jonathan and Emily were focusing on their marriage, an unexpected message arrived one morning. It was from one of Emily's longtime followers on her crafting channel. Hi Emily. I just wanted to say thank you for your latest video. Your honesty about your struggles really resonated with me. You've inspired me to start crafting again after years of feeling like I wasn't good enough. Please keep sharing, you're making a difference. Emily read the message aloud to Jonathan, her voice trembling with emotion. I almost gave up on this, she said, holding up her phone. But maybe I still have something to offer. Jonathan smiled. Course you do. You're talented, Emily. And you've always had a way of connecting with people. Encouraged by the message, Emily decided to revitalize her crafting channel. This time she involved Jonathan in the process. Together they brainstormed new ideas, filmed tutorials, and even shared glimpses of their crafting corner. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Viewers praised Emily's authenticity and were delighted to see Jonathan joining her in the videos. Slowly but surely, Emily regained her confidence, not just in her craft but in herself. The road ahead. As the months went by, Jonathan and Emily found a new rhythm. Their marriage wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, but they faced those challenges together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to Jonathan. Do you ever think about what might have happened if we hadn't gone through all this? She asked. Jonathan thought for a moment before replying. I think we would have kept going, but we might not have grown. This wasn't easy, Emily. But maybe it was what we needed to become stronger. Emily nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder. I'm just glad we didn't give up. Jonathan smiled, wrapping his arm around her. Me too. The seasons changed, and with them, Jonathan and Emily's relationship continued to evolve. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A relationship built on hard-won lessons, intentional actions, and the renewed commitment to never let silence create distance again. Their shared crafting project had transformed from a mere hobby into a passion that brought them closer. Emily's confidence in her skills and Jonathan's growing interest in creative work allowed them to connect on a deeper level. Still, there were moments when the shadows of the past threatened to resurface, testing their resolve. An unexpected invitation. One day, as Emily prepared for a crafting live stream, she hesitated, looking at Jonathan with uncertainty. John, she began, twisting the corner of her apron. What would you think about joining me on the live stream today? Jonathan paused mid-step. Me. In camera. Emily nodded, her eyes hopeful. Our followers loved seeing you in the last video. They said it was inspiring to see us working together. I thought maybe it could be something we do again. Jonathan considered her request. He wasn't one for the spotlight, but the idea of helping Emily and connecting with her audience felt oddly appealing. All right, he said finally, but don't expect me to know what I'm doing. Emily grinned. That's half the fun. A live stream to remember. As the camera rolled, Emily introduced Jonathan to her viewers. Hi everyone. Today I have a special guest. My husband John, she said, smiling at him. Jonathan gave an awkward wave. Hey everyone. Be warned. I'm a total beginner. The chat erupted with comments of encouragement. Welcome, John. We're so happy to see you. A crafting couple. How sweet. Don't worry, John, we all started somewhere. The project for the day was a simple photo frame, and Emily guided Jonathan through each step. They laughed as Jonathan struggled to hold the frame steady while gluing, and the chat loved their playful banter. By the end of the stream, Jonathan held up his finished frame, lopsided but charming in its imperfections. Not bad for my first try, right? He joked. The viewers responded with an outpouring of support. Great job, John. We want more husband crafting episodes. You two are such a great team. This is so inspiring. Emily glanced at Jonathan, her smile full of pride. You did great, she said softly. A milestone celebration. A few weeks later, Emily's channel hit a significant milestone, 100,000 subscribers. To celebrate, she and Jonathan decided to host a giveaway and live stream a special Q&A session. During the live stream, viewers asked everything from crafting tips to personal questions about their relationship. How do you two manage to work together without driving each other crazy? One viewer asked. Jonathan chuckled. Well, there's a lot of trial and error and patience. Mostly on her part. Emily laughed. And on his part too. It's all about communicating and not being afraid to mess up. As they answered questions, Jonathan noticed how relaxed and happy Emily seemed. It was a far cry from the uncertainty and doubt that had clouded her a few months ago. The real test. Their renewed connection, however, was tested one evening when Emily received an unexpected email. It was from Chris. The email was brief. Hi, Emily. I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to say congratulations on your success. You deserve it. Take care. Emily stared at the message, her chest tightening. She debated whether to tell Jonathan but ultimately decided she couldn't keep it from him. John, she said later that evening, showing him the email, I thought you should see this. Jonathan read the email silently. His expression unreadable. After a moment, he handed her the phone. Do you want to reply? He asked calmly. No, Emily said firmly. I don't think there's anything left to say. Jonathan nodded. Then delete it. We don't need any more distractions. Emily deleted the email without hesitation, and Jonathan's trust in her deepened. A growing partnership. As their personal life stabilized, their shared crafting projects began to flourish. Emily's channel became a space not just for creativity but also for stories of perseverance, teamwork, and growth. Jonathan, though still a novice crafter, became a favorite among viewers for his humor and candidness. One day, as they worked on a particularly challenging project, Emily paused and looked at Jonathan. John, she said, her voice steady, I never imagined we'd be here, doing this together. After everything we've been through, I just want you to know how grateful I am for you. Jonathan smiled, his eyes warm. I'm grateful for you too, Emily. We've come a long way, and I wouldn't trade this for anything. A symbol of renewal. To mark their progress, Emily suggested they create something special together, a handcrafted time capsule. We'll fill it with letters to each other, small keepsakes, and maybe even some photos from our projects, she explained. Jonathan nodded. And we'll open it on our 10th anniversary. Deal. Deal, Emily agreed. As they worked on the time capsule, it became a symbol of their renewed commitment. The process wasn't just about crafting. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would remind them of the journey they had taken together. The day their time capsule was sealed marked a turning point for Jonathan and Emily. It wasn't just an object they created together. It was a testament to their resilience, growth, and unwavering determination to rebuild their marriage. As they buried it in their backyard, they felt a sense of closure for the pain they had endured and hope for the life they were creating. Months turned into years, and with each passing day, their bond grew stronger. The shadows of the past were no longer looming threats but quiet reminders of how far they had come. A quiet celebration. On a warm spring evening, Jonathan and Emily decided to celebrate their progress with a quiet dinner at home. Their crafting corner had expanded, turning into a cozy workshop filled with supplies, completed projects, and a sense of shared purpose. As they sat at the dining table, surrounded by flickering candlelight, Emily raised her glass. To us, she said, her voice steady. To us, Jonathan replied, clinking his glass against hers. They didn't need grand declarations. Their journey spoke for itself. An unexpected message of gratitude. Emily's crafting channel had grown into a thriving community. It wasn't just about crafts anymore. It was a space where people shared their stories of perseverance, healing, and second chances. One day, Emily received a message that stopped her in her tracks. Dear Emily, I've been following your journey for a while now, and I want to thank you for your honesty and courage. Watching you and your husband work through your challenges has inspired me to fight for my own marriage. Your story reminded me that love is worth the effort, even when it feels impossible. Thank you for showing me that healing is possible. You've made a difference in my life." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she read the message aloud to Jonathan. "See," Jonathan said with a gentle smile. "Your story matters. Our story matters." Emily nodded, her heart full. Renewed vows. On the eve of their 5th wedding anniversary, Jonathan surprised Emily with a small, intimate ceremony in their backyard. "I thought it might be time to renew our vows," he said, holding her hand. Emily's eyes glistened with tears. "John, this is beautiful. Thank you." Their closest friends and family gathered as they exchanged heartfelt vows, reaffirming their love and commitment. The moment was simple but profound, a quiet celebration of everything they had overcome and everything they looked forward to. Lessons learned. As they stood together, watching the sunset after the ceremony, Jonathan turned to Emily. "We've learned a lot these past few years," he said. Emily nodded. "That love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. A series of choices we make every single day." Jonathan smiled. "And it's worth it." Emily leaned into him, her heart full of gratitude. "It is." The final chapter. Jonathan and Emily's journey wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance, forgiveness, and the power of choosing each other every day. Their love, though tested, emerged stronger, rooted in trust, respect, and shared purpose. Their story became a beacon of hope for others, showing that even when the path is difficult, healing and growth are possible for those willing to put in the work. As they sat on the porch, hand in hand, watching the stars, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be, together.